Hi boys and girls, Mrs. Jauch here. We're going to do some science, that's why I have my lab coat on again. We're going to talk today about things that sink and float. I'm going to start by just reading a few pages of this book, Sinking and Floating by Natalie Brzezinski. Sinking and floating. Here's our table of contents. Watch and wonder, watch a leaf, it floats across a pond. See a boat, even filled with people, it floats on lakes and oceans. Did you ever wonder why? Drop a small stone into water, watch it quickly sink. Your wonder will grow. Yet sinking and floating are not really mysteries. Let's learn about the different reasons they happen. On top or below? Long ago, the Greek scientist Archimedes sat in a bathtub. He figured out some important ideas by seeing the water he had displaced. You can learn by doing too. Gather some small things together. They can be natural or manufactured. You might try a pine cone, a piece of cork, and a lemon. You could test a safety pin, a marble, and a penny. Hold each one in your hand. Which things feel light? Which are heavier? Now put each one into a large bowl filled with water. Which things float on top? Which things sink below? Many things float when you put them in water. Their weight does not pull them all the way under the surface. This is because water pushes up on any object that you put into it. This upward force is called buoyancy. It depends on how much liquid the object has pushed out of the way. The pine cone and the cork float. Their weight is not big enough to overcome the buoyant force. The marble and the penny sink. Their weight is bigger than the buoyant force. What about the lemon and the safety pin? The sunny fruit is heavier than the marble and the penny, yet it floats. The steel safety pin weighs less than the marble, penny, or the lemon, yet the safety pin sinks. Are you surprised? There is more to sinking and floating than weight alone. All right, boys and girls, so objects are made up of tiny molecules, and the more tightly packed the molecules are, the more dense an object is, and the more likely it is to sink. When the molecules are spread out, they are more likely to float. So let's watch these two objects. Do you think you know which ones are going to sink and which are going to float? I bet you are right. Boys and girls, I have some different balls here that we're going to put in my tub of water to see which ones will sink and which ones will float. Before we get started, I want you to think, which ones of these do you think will sink and which do you think will float? Did you think a softball would sink or float? Let's test it. Ah, it floats. The water, so much surface area, the water gets displaced and helps it hold on up. What about the tennis ball? Did you think it will sink or float? It floats too. Now what about the wiffle ball? It's really light. Do you think it will float? It did for a second, but I think the holes in there made it sink. The next two tricky ones are my ping pong ball and the golf ball. One is very light and one is very dense. The molecules in the golf ball are tightly packed together. Do you remember what that means? Will it sink or float? Let's put them both in and see. It sank. The molecules are so tightly packed, it made it sink. What can we do to this golf ball to make it float? I'll give you a second to think about that. All right, boys and girls, maybe you thought of this already. I took my bubble wrap, I wrapped my golf ball inside there, and now I'm going to put it back into the water. Do you think now it will float, or do you still think it will sink? Remember, when you add air, that things become more buoyant. That's why large ships can still stay floating. So what do you think? Let's test. Now it floats. More water was pushed out of the way and there's more air in the bubble wrap and it helps our golf ball to now float. Now it's your turn. Take a bucket of water, gather some household objects, and then predict what you think will happen. Will they sink? Will they float? Remember to think about how dense your object is and how much air is in that object. Then test them out. See what happens, but make sure you check with your parents first that you can put those things into water. You can have fun in the bathtub, in the sink, or just in a bucket of water like I did. Have fun!